Good. Shavua Tov, everybody. We're beginning now the Parsha Vayakel. Vayakel. It is the second to the last portion that we read in the book of Exodus. And it basically just repeats over everything that we learned 3 weeks ago in Parsha Truma, namely all the ingredients and the building of the tabernacle in the desert. The Jewish people left Egypt. They took this portable holy temple with them called the Mishkan, and they built it. They put it together every time they camped. 42 times they camped. They put it together, took it apart, and then they traveled again. And as we learn all the details that were back then, it's basically just repeats the whole thing here. But here it says that the Jewish people actually did it. That was the whole thing. 1 second. People that are waiting to come in. Wonderful. Wonderful. Shalom Dovi. I see you're on your phone is two times, but that's good. Oh, good. Okay. So, how does the Torah portion start? The Torah portion starts off that Moshe gathers together all the Jewish people. Vayakel Moshe. Moshe gathered together all of the Jewish people. And then he told them, this is what you have to do. He basically repeated over what he had already said before. Vayakel Moshe. He gathered the Jewish people and he said, these are the things that God commanded you to do. And then what does he say? 6 days you should do your work, and on the 7th day you should rest. Hey, what's that got to do with the Holy Temple? Right? What's that got to do? That's how he begins talking about actually making this tabernacle. Don't let any fire be burnt in your, don't burn any fire in all of your dwells on Shabbat. And then it says, again, take a truma, actually take the donation from everybody and let's actually build this temple, this tabernacle. Let's do it. Right? So in other words, it basically repeats over just the same thing as it said 3 weeks ago when God gave the commandments. We went over it in very great detail. But for some strange reason, it starts off with the commandment of Shabbat. Now, the Jewish people already knew the commandment of Shabbat. It was it's the 4th of the 10 commandments, 10 commandments. So they knew about it. And in fact, they were even commanded before about Shabbat, but not like the same thing as giving them the Torah. So why is he repeating it over again? So we're going to talk a little bit about this now. Okay, just to repeat again, the idea of Chassidut, Chabad, is basically to bring out the unique idea of Judaism that is not in any other religion or philosophy. And that is to bring everyone in the world, everyone in the world, Jews first of all, start with the Jews, to feel that God is creating us and nothing exists in the world on its own. Everything is being created constantly by God. Step number 1. Step number 2, everything is being created by God for a purpose. For a purpose. Step number 2. Step number 3, God actually cares about us. This God who's creating everything, he cares about us and he reacts to what we do. He reacts to our prayers, he reacts to our deeds, he reacts to our thoughts, he reacts to and this is especially stressed by the temple, the tabernacle. This is a meeting place, a wedding canopy between us, the Jewish people, and God. And the Jewish people are supposed to, they were chosen. We're the chosen people. We're the chosen people. We're chosen by God to tell everybody just what I just said. To let everyone in the world know that there's a creator and the creator is creating us. Now, that's belief, but that's not enough. You have to try to understand God as much as possible. And because God is totally incomprehensible, but there are certain things which are comprehensible. Namely, here we are, where the world exists, and also the prophets Isaiah and Ezekiel and Zephaniah, Zechariah tell us that there are angels. They saw angels, and it's very, very complicated, the visions of these angels. And there are great Jews, holy, pure Jews, that believe all this and that did all the commandments, that do all the Torah, and they had special qualities of perception, like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, like the Rabbi Yitzchak Luria. And these people have perception. They can tell us what is going on in the upper worlds, according to these texts, the visions of Isaiah and etc. And also according to certain revelations that they received, how they understand the Torah. So this is very deep stuff, but on the other hand, it's talking about the physical world we see. So it's not so deep. The idea of Hasidut is that we should not be removed from the world in any way, but just that the world should not have a negative effect on us, and we should, yes, have a positive effect on the world. Right? We have to learn from everything there is in the world. Okay, so if you want to sum it up in one word, the topic of Hasidut Chabad is God. God. To understand God, to feel God, to love God, to serve God, to fear God, to believe in God, to deepen our levels of belief, to more validate our levels of love and connection to God. God, that's the topic. The whole topic is God. Feeling God in the Torah, feeling God in the commandments, feeling God in every moment of our life, feeling God. And that's, by the way, one side effect is the negativity. That's the first of the 10 commandments. I am God that took you out of Egypt. First of the 10 commandments. Second of the 10 commandments is don't worship any other gods, because if you worship other gods, other powers, other spirits, other people, other whatever personages, so it takes your mind off of your creator. Your creator is giving you life. He's giving you life. He's enlivening you. He's creating the world. Feel it. You can feel it. It's infinitely close to you. Idolatry takes your mind off of this amazing gift that we have, which is called life. It makes us think about receiving, not about what we've already received, what God is giving us automatically. Most precious thing in the world, life. And then we can start thinking about what does God want us to do with our life. Okay, so we have to think about God. So, okay, that's what the whole Torah was. When God gave the Torah, so he revealed himself, and he revealed himself in words. Words. The world is also God's words, but the world aren't words that you can understand what to do. It just explains it that there's a big miracle. The world is a big miracle. It's the words of God. But there's the meaning behind everything. That's from the Torah. The Torah gives us the meaning. Those are different types of words. It's different words. Those are deeper words. Words of love. Here we go. Vayakel Moshe gathered together. This is a bit long, so I hope we'll finish as much as we can. But every word is beautiful. Vayakel Moshe. That's how this Torah portion begins. Vayakel Moshe gathered together. Moshe gathered together all the Jewish people. Vayomer, and he said to them, 6 days you should do your work, and on the 7th day will be holy. Shabbat, Shabbaton LaHashem, it will be a holy day for God. And then God starts telling them about, okay, get to work, start making the temple, tabernacle. We have to understand, to understand, Maimar Razal, the rabbis say, on this, Parshas Shabbos, why is this paragraph about keeping Shabbat right before Lo Melechat Mishkan, before the building of the tabernacle? There's all sorts of explanations, of course. Now you have to remember Keep it in mind, the Torah is written by God, who is creating you right now. He's giving you life right now. The Torah is written, every word, by God. God is not making mistakes. Maybe you might think he made a mistake when he created you, but that's also not right. That's a big mistake. That itself is a mistake. That's your mistake. God does not make mistakes. He knows what he's doing. We don't know what he's doing, but he does definitely. So now let's understand a little bit about what God is doing. Lahavin, let's understand what the rabbis say. Why is this paragraph about Shabbat before this commandment to actually make the tabernacle? We have to understand. Why is it when God commands to Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, Olav Shalom? Why is it when God, HaKodesh, this is the abbreviation, HaKodesh Baruch Hu, when he commands Moshe Rabbeinu, Olav Shalom, in Parsha Truma, remember back then? Truma and Tetzavet, 3 weeks ago, Ne'amar, it says, first of all, Tamalachet Kliya Mishkan. It says, first of all, to make these vessels of the Mishkan, namely the ark, the shulchan, the table, where the bread was, the 12 loaves of bread, the menorah, where they lit the lamps. First of all, he talks about the vessels. Then afterwards, it talks about Malechet Mishkan Atzmo. Then it talks about making the actual building, namely Hayuriot, Shalom Mishkan. There were these animal skins and drapes that went over the tabernacle because it was open, and then there were these drapes that were all around it, and then there were drapes that separated between each level and each room of the tabernacle. So first of all, it talked about the vessels, what's inside, and then afterwards it talked about the house, which usually you don't do things like that. You usually buy a house and you put the vessels in it. But God told Moses, first of all, how to make the vessels, and then afterwards, if you remember Parshas Truma, you can look over there. And then the end, it talked about how to make the drapes and the tabernacle with the wood, shatzi shitim, and etc. And afterwards, the Besof, and finally, in the end, remember when God commanded, this is 3 weeks ago. First of all, God says how to make the vessels, then it says how to make the actual building and the tent and everything. And afterwards, it says, Parshas Kitisa, Shabbos, Shabbatotai. So if we see back then, what did it say? First of all, it talked about making, when God gave the commandment 3 weeks ago, we talked about it the first time. It talked about making the vessels. Then afterwards, it talks about making all the curtains and the drapes and things like that. And then making the tent of meeting. And afterwards, it talked about Shabbat. But here, when Moses is giving it over to the Jewish people, namely right here in Parshas Vayakel, so Moses completely transformed the Seder, the order. First of all, he told them, keeping Shabbos. Then afterwards, he told them about how to make the Mishkan, all the drapes and everything. And then afterwards, he talked about the vessels. That's in this week's Torah portion. Look and see. By the way, I don't think that we're going to learn at 3 o'clock the Chumash. I think we're going to learn, because it just repeats over the same thing that we learned before, so we know what it is. And there's very little commentary by Rashi over here. So I think what we're going to do is learn the Megillah that we read on Purim. We'll learn that with Rashi and other commentaries. Little historical background there. Okay, afterwards, Malechet Mishkan. And then first of all, here he talks about, first of all, Shabbat, and then he talks about making the building, and then afterwards he talks about the vessels. Okay, why? Right back there, when God gave the commandment, first of all, he talked about the vessels, and then the building, and then Shabbat. And here he talks about Shabbat first, and then afterwards he talks about the building, and then afterwards he talks about the vessels. Why is it? I mean, the building stayed in the same place in the middle, but Shabbat, and when God gave the commandment, Shabbat was last, and here it's first. And the vessels were first, and here they're last. Why? Here Hine, behold, Kasiv, it is written, Asuli Mikdash v'shachanti betocha. It says, make me a make me a holy temple and I will dwell in it. Right? Wrong. It doesn't say that. It says, make me a holy temple and I will dwell in them. But it doesn't say in the Torah, I will dwell in it, even though it's true. God did dwell in it. But I will dwell inside of them. And some people say what it means, betoch klolat neshamas Israel, inside of every single Jew. Yishkon will dwell kavod Hashem, the glory of God. Al yadei Mishkan, by means of this Mishkan, by means of building the holy temple in the desert, there was the tabernacle. And until they built the holy temple, there was like 440 years, there was the tabernacle in different forms in Israel. In any case, it was the same thing. It says also the Mikdash is referring to the Mishkan, it's also referring to the holy temple. When there was this holy temple, so God rested not just in it, but in every single Jew. What about now? Akshav, also now, Gamkein also, and this is the point of Chassidut, also now, who it is, Al Yadei Yaskam, when the Jewish people work in Torah and the commandments. When the people do, Jewish people do Torah and its commandments, is they simulate the holy temple. They make themselves into a holy temple. The Torah is like the vessels of the tabernacle. That's the Torah. The commandments, they are the Yeriot of Mishkan. These are the curtains of the Mishkan. By means of the commandments, these are the garments for the soul. When the Jews do the learn the Torah, what is learning the Torah? Learning the Torah goes inside of you. When you learn the Torah goes inside of you. Learning the Torah means you understand. You use your brain. You use your understanding. You use your thought. You use your mind. You have to understand. Right? In order to understand, it implies a lot of things. You have to understand the language. You have to understand the topic. You have to understand the outcome, the meaning. The point, you have to actually understand. Learning Torah means you have to understand what's going on. That's the whole idea of the Torah. The Torah is not just saying these mystical words and these magical formulas, even though that's also true. That's what the Torah is. But the main thing of the Torah is to get it inside of you, inside of your mind. So the Torah is like the vessels in the Mishkan. The Torah is inside. Those are the things that were inside. The menorah that they lit, the table with the bread on it, the altars, of course, the ark with the Torah. So the things you do something with, they hold something. The commandments, they are like the Urios. Why the Urios? Because that surrounds everything. That's like the building. The building surrounds you. Not like the Torah. The Torah has to go inside of you. The commandments, you don't understand the commandments. We can't understand the commandments, right? You put on, why in the world would God want us to put on two little boxes, one on our arm, one on our, why would God himself wants us to do that? Why would God want a thing like that? We can understand an angel or Moses or something, but God himself wants us to do these things. That makes no sense. That's the whole idea. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't go into your mind. A little bit, you can understand. There's intentions according to Kabbalah, according to different midrashic things, to link your brain to God, your arm to God, your heart, your mind. But the commandments are basically surrounding you. They're God's will. The Torah is God's wisdom. The commandments, these are the Urios, these are the commandments, they become like a garment for the soul. Like it says, it says that it will go in front of you, will walk before you after a person dies. His righteousness, and God will surround you, gather you. That's the commandments. It's explained in the 4th chapter of the Tanya, also 35th chapter. This is kamo because Urios. This is like the curtains, Shem, Makifim, they surround. And the Torah, this is like food for the soul. Like it says, V'torah tcha b'toch me'ai. Like it says, your Torah is in my stomach. King David said it. Because King David learned the Torah. That's what he did all the time. He said he would wake up in the middle of the night, he would learn the Torah. V'zeu, that's Bechinas Kli Mishkan. This is the level of the vessels of the Mishkan. She'en Bechinas Penimim. And that's the inside. That's the Torah is the inside. Well, let's understand this by us. In other words, when we learn the Torah, when a Jew learns the Torah, he is making the vessels of his personal holy temple. And when he does the commandments, he is building the actual body, the curtains and etc. of his personal holy temple. And what's the idea of the holy temple? Is that God is revealed there. Let's understand this. We have to understand, first of all, let's understand something. What is God? God said, I am God, I never change. Okay, now we're getting personal here. What is God? God is not just God of the Jews. God creates everything. God creates everything. God is the God of the stones, of the plants, of the animals, of all humanity. God is the God of the stars and angels, the spirit. All being is being created by God. As we said so many times, God does not really exist in any way we can understand. He creates all existence. But on the other hand, God certainly does exist. He took the Jews out of Egypt personally. God personally creates us, enlivens us, me and you. Let's understand what is God. All these things that making the temple and doing the Torah and doing the commandments and revealing with Shabbat first and Shabbos last, and what's going on over here, it all comes from God. Let's understand what God is. It says, Ani Hashem lo sheniti, I am God, I never changed. And I never change. Now think about this one instant. God is creating me, He's creating you, He's creating the whole world. According to the Torah, 5,782 and a half years ago, God created time. He started creating being, started creating existence. That's not a change. I mean, God had to do something to create this, didn't He do? He spoke. The Torah tells us He spoke. When a person speaks, he puts out energy. Something happened, right? Something happened. And you can't say it happened outside of God because there is no outside of God. There's no empty space. There's not God and something else. There is no anything else. Like I say, all existence is just a creation. But it says, I am God, I never changed. How can this possibly be that He never changed? The God has not got any change. God is not changed, He's not affected. By means of the creation of the world. Just like God is alone, and unique. Before the world was created. He also is after the world was created. Like it says, you are the same God as before the world was created, and you are the same God as after the world was created. When was the world created? Right now, God is creating it. He's creating everything every second, and He does not change at all. What it means to say, that the creation of the world does not does not cause in Him any change. God forbid. Because if it does, then we're making God into a human being, a person, a thing. You can't do that. What's it called? Reification or something? Because the life which is drawn down from God in order to enliven the worlds, kololos or v'chayos, all this light and life to create the world, it is only just a ray of godliness from God's essence. This is drawn down from Him, a ray in general in the world. Like if you take a picture of me and you tear up the picture, it doesn't hurt me. Because the picture is just a ray of me. It doesn't hurt me. Similarly, when you take a picture of me, it doesn't take away anything from me. Because it's just a ray of me. Of course, to bring a really good example, we can't really bring a good example because we have to understand just basically, just thinking about it logically, 1 second. If we say God creates the world from nothing, it means that the world is made of nothing. All of the energy and the quarks and the spirit and whatever you want to say the world is made of, that is really made from nothing. God is creating everything from nothing. We have no idea what it means, nothing. God creates the black holes and he creates the quarks. He creates all the spirit. It's all just creations of God. And what is it created from? It's created from nothing. So if it's created from nothing, it means that it can't subtract anything from God because it's nothing, right? What's 1,000,000 minus 0? Right? It's the same thing, didn't change. What's 1,000,000,000 minus 0? What's 1,000,000,000? Okay, let's make it maybe a smaller number. What is 0.00000? Let's say I have 1,000 zeros and 1 minus 0. Same thing. No matter how small the number is, how big the number is, if you take 0 from it, it's 0. So when God created the world, he created from 0. So he took 1,000,000 zeros away from himself. So it didn't change it. Okay, that's a poor example, but it's the best one I can think of. What we're saying here is that the point the Rebbe is trying to get to is that God is totally unlike anything we can possibly imagine. His reality is unlike anything because it's not a separate reality from us. It's not separate. Somehow or other, our very existence that we take, for example, everybody knows they exist, right? Descartes, cogito ergo sum. I am conscious, therefore I exist. Well, where does your consciousness come from, right? Where does it come from? It says it's a creation of God. So you're so sure that you exist. The fact is you don't. It's not so certain. Your existence comes from God all the time. God is not a separate being from you. And this makes absolutely no sense, but the fact is it's true. Even more no sense is that God cares about us. We're made of nothing. We're nothing, and God cares about us. He creates us constantly. And not just that he cares about the Jews, he cares about the rocks and the plants. And even more important, he cares about every human being. They're alive. They're created in God's image. That's what it says in the Torah anyway. Every human being is created in God's image. No matter how much they try not to, that's the fact. It says the reason that so therefore God's reality is so infinitely more real than our reality. It says that if a person would see an angel, he would completely die from fright. By means of this, ha'ora, by means of this ray that God uses to create the world, like you say, God's word. Hora hu yisbarech mechaya oto, he enlivens the world. Umahave oto, and he keeps the world in existence. May ayin liesh from nothing to something. But God, in his essence and his being, is completely removed from the world. That's why Kodesh Baruch Hu was called Kodesh Umuvda. Kodesh Baruch Hu was separate from the world. Not that the world is here and God is way, way up there. He's very far away from us. That's already getting close to idolatry, to say that the world is separate from God. The fact of the matter is it's not separate from God, and God is not far away. He is infinitely close to us. He's creating us. You feel this? I don't feel it, but that's the fact. I read there's a mimer of the Rebbe. Why don't we feel that God is creating us? Why not? It's such an obvious thing. It says because God is creating us in his image. And just like God's image, there's nothing creating him. Nothing creates God. So we have the same feeling that nothing is creating us. However it is, that's the fact. And this God that's infinite, he cares about us and he reacts to our prayers. This makes even less sense than what we just talked about before, that God doesn't change. He actually reacts and he cares about what we do. God is a person that God spoke. That's the whole Bible. He spoke to Adam. He told Adam what to do. He got mad when Adam didn't do what he wanted to. He liked Abraham. He liked Noah. We have to know what God we're dealing with over here. It says, Vagam Shenemar, even though it says, Atamachayas Kulam, God is totally above any of the creations. 1 second, it says, God, you enliven everything. So he is involved. It's true, God enlivens everything. But the existence of everything comes from what's this called this ray of godliness. Right? And that's the secret of faith. The secret of faith. How it is that we exist and we seem to be. Just look at the simple narrative of the Bible. What's the simple narrative of the Bible? There's one of the characters of the Bible is called God. And this character called God, he creates this thing which is called the world, makes this creation like a composer makes a symphony. So God made this thing called the world, and the world is a real separate existence, but God is still involved in it. Not like a composer with a symphony. Well, let's say like a composer, he's listening to his symphony being played constantly. That's a simple narrative of the Bible. And then there's the Abraham pops up, and Noah pops up, and Abraham, and then there's different people, and there's different things. And God is one of the creators. Something like what is it called? The Greek literature, the Iliad, the Odyssey, whatever it is. God is one of the creators, right? God is one of the characters. That's the simple narrative of the Torah. But the fact of the matter is that is, it's true. It's 100% true, but it's very misleading. Because it makes us think that just because that God created the world, that's it. That's what God is. Or God gave us the Torah, then that's it. That God is something separate. Not. That's what. If so, it comes out that there's no real intimate connection with God. What is there to love? Why should we love God? He created the world 5 billion years ago, or 5 trillion years ago, or yesterday. What difference does it make? Right? That's a simple. There's nothing to get excited about in the Torah. And who believes it? Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not true. But here the Rebbe is saying, listen, I'm giving you another option. God is creating us right now. That's a thing that's only hinted at in the Torah, but it's the fact. And that's the message of Judaism to the world. That's what Moshiach is going to do. To make everybody realize how close God is. But how is God creating us? He's creating us from this ray. In the Torah, it's called God's word. This is Bechinas Malchus. So this is what's called the lowest of the 10 sfirot of God. This is called God's kingship. Yitbarech. Like it says, Malchutcha Malchut Kolamim. King David said, your kingship is your kingship. Your lowest aspect is the highest aspect of all the worlds. Your ability as a king, which that's your lowest aspect, the lowest of the 10 sfirot. That's the kingship of all the worlds, and that's the highest of all the worlds. Shechayot kol ha'olamot, that the life of all the worlds, whom b'chinat malchutcha, comes from God's kingship. Namely, what is it? Shema shenikrahu yisbrech melech, that which God has called a king over us. Hem chayim v'kayimim. This is what keeps them alive and existent. So God's lowest aspect, that He's a king over us, this is what keeps me and you alive and existing. And the more that you feel this, by the way, the more that you feel this, the less you get anxious about the world and nervous and depressed and everything. Right? Because you know that God He believes in you. He's creating you. You have to do something about it. But that's what it says. That's what we say in our prayers. May your name be praised. Your name be praised forever, our King. What does it mean? She's pashtus midas malchuso, that this spreading out, this coming down of God's kingship, which is also called God's name. Right? Like a person has a name, that's the lowest aspect of the person. The name. Hu la'ad, it's forever. I know ad and it's forever and ever. Ki midas malchuso, because God's aspect of God's kingship is also Ein Sof, it's infinite mamish. Kivin shehi ha'ora mimenu yisprech. Because this aspect of God's kingship is just a ray of godliness. That's God's name. This ray of godliness, that's what keeps me and you alive. That's what keeps me and you in existence. That's what keeps the whole world in existence. This God's name. The lowest aspect of God is the highest, most incomprehensible aspect of existence. That's what it says in brachas. We say in the blessings right before we say Shema Yisrael, right? The Jewish prayers are built like it says, like the ladder of Jacob, in a way that brings us from total, how do you say, feeling distant from God, to being more and more aware of the fact that he's creating us and he's enlivening us and how much he loves us and how awesome he is and how amazing he is, and he creates the skies and he creates the stars, and all the planets are screaming out to God, and the angels are screaming, and the rivers and the trees and the wind and everything is calling out to God. The more we realize this, then the more we get excited about the Creator, and the more we realize this world is tremendously important to the Creator. And the world does not affect us negatively, but rather we appreciate in the world God. That's what it says in Brachas Yotzer, Mashmiim b'yira yachad b'kol divrei Elokim chayim, that the angels, that they hear, they make heard in fear the sound of the living God and the King of the world. She'ein masihim, all these angels, they cannot grasp Rakam Shacha, only this drawing down from this level of Elokim, Divrei Elokim Chaim. The angels are going berserk in the upper worlds. Why? Because they feel that you ever been in a zoo or any of those places when they feed the animals? So the animals, that's like, there's even a time, there's a feeding time, right? When they feed the bears, when they feed you see them getting fed, then they're really active. Then they're really active, and sometimes they stand on their high legs and everybody claps their hands, right? Well, that's what's happening with all the angels. All the angels are being enlivened by this aspect of God, which is called Elokim. The living God, the King of the world, the lowest aspect of God. That's what enlivens them and creates them. Good, being created, we don't really comprehend, but being alive, we comprehend. We see people die. You ever see a dead body? Ever been at a funeral? Not nice. People die. Right here is under them in this box is poor Yorick, a fellow of infinite jest, and there he is laying in a box. That's terrible. So where did he get his life from in the first place? Right? This is a pretty big miracle. He got it from the same place we got it from. Hey, it's the same miracle with us. That's pretty amazing. Who is creating him? God. God, the same. Who is enlivening him? The same God that's enlivening him, the same God that's creating him, and is creating me and you also. And it all comes from just a ray of God. But God's essence, that's what we're talking about here. God's essence, is totally removed. And the Malay, the Leis Machshava Tafisa Bey, Kalal, this is abbreviation. There is no thought that can grasp God at all, not even the angels. Therefore, it says, God says, I never changed. What does it mean, I never changed? We have no comprehension. Listen, we have no comprehension. The difference between the creator and the creation, everything in the creation is always changing. It's always changing. I'm no scientist. I'm far away from it, very far away. But as far as I know, there's nothing to try to get the absolute zero. Is there such a thing as absolute zero? I don't know. Anyway, you can't get absolute zero. Like you can't make an absolute vacuum. Can you make it? I don't know. Anyway, close. There has to be something there. And in any case, even if you make an absolute vacuum, there's space. There's something there. Right? But the main thing I want to talk about is absolute zero. Absolute. Basically, I guess the same thing. Because the essence of the world is change. There has to be change. Everything is changing. God is never changing. Why is he never changing? Because he's creating everything. He's above change. He creates this whole concept of change. That's the whole story of the Bible. That's why he created the world in 7 days. Why didn't he create the world in just 1 second? Boop. That's it, right? Because he wants there to be this thing of change going from first day to the second day to the third day. That's the idea. That's what it says, that the angels, they lift up the throne of God. It says they sweat from the heat or whatever, the energy of God's throne. What does it mean they sweat? That they are in awe of the Midas Malchuso, of God's kingship. That God is a king sitting on a throne high and elevated. And therefore the angels, the angels receive on themselves the yoke of heaven. And that's why in the Jewish prayer, see if you can get a Jewish prayer book somewhere. in English and look in it, and you'll see that one whole part of, before we say Shema Yisrael, is devoted to what the angels are doing, how the angels are all burning up and how they're all praising God and how they're all going crazy and they're singing songs. In other words, why are they doing this? To let us know that there's something to get excited about. That if we would just be aware of what God is, like the angels are, then we would be excited as they are. What are they excited about, these angels? Why? They feel that God is creating them. They feel that their whole existence and all of their life depends totally on the Creator. They feel it. They don't understand what it is, but they feel it. If you remember, we talked about in the previous mimer that these revelations that they get come when the Jews pray. Remember we learned that? And what the Jews do in the world, because that's the way God set up the whole thing. Set up this whole business, and he gave the Torah to the Jews and all these secrets and things like that. These are the Jews. But what the Rebbe now wants us to get a little bit of appreciation of what is the God that we're praying to. What is the God that we can depend on? What is the God who's creating us, enlivening us? And this will keep us away from idolatry. We'll stop praying to people, to worshiping idols, to worshiping ourselves. And we'll understand that we're very important to God's eyes. God wants us to be partners, but he wants us to be partners with him. He's creating us. When we feel this and start to realize it, then it's a whole different business. Then prayer becomes different. Life becomes different. It becomes more dynamic. It doesn't mean that we're going to stop having, our own egotistical ideas. You don't all of a sudden become fixed up. But it does automatically, when you think about this, it does automatically fix you up 5%. At least something. The rest, 95, you have to do on your own. But at least there's 5%, right? It's like a person that's in the middle of the ocean and they throw him a life saver. What is the life raft or something? So good. I mean, he has to grab onto it and he has to hold on to it and he has to, etc. Think positively and that. But nevertheless, this is a lifesaver. Fix yourself thinking about God properly, as we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. Let's now learn the Devar Malchut.